Harrison stood at the panoramic window of his office on the 50th floor of a skyscraper in downtown New York City. His gaze roamed the horizon, watching the sun slowly sink behind the skyscrapers, coloring the sky in shades of orange and pink. He took a deep breath, feeling the gravity of his position. "Mr. Harrison," came a voice from the intercom, "Miss Thompson is here to see you." "Send her in, Carol," John replied, not taking his eyes off the window. The door opened and Sarah Thompson, John's personal assistant, entered the office. She was dressed in a strict business suit. Her brown hair was gathered into a neat bundle. "John, are you all right?" Sarah asked, noticing her boss's unusual brooding. John slowly turned toward her. His face expressed a mixture of fatigue and determination. "Sarah, how many years have we been working together?" he asked abruptly. "Almost 10 years, John." "Why?" "And in those 10 years, do you think I've changed?" Sarah thought for a moment. "Well, the company has definitely grown. We're on the Fortune 500 list now. You've become more confident, I'd say." John grinned bitterly. "Confident? Yeah, I guess you could say that. Or maybe just more detached from reality." "John, what's your point?" Sarah frowned, sensing the conversation was taking an unusual turn. John walked over to his desk and sat down in a leather chair. He gestured for Sarah to sit across from him. "Sarah, I've spent the last few weeks thinking about our company, about myself, about how we affect people's lives," he began, "and I've come to the conclusion that I need to conduct an experiment." "An experiment? What kind?" Sarah leaned forward, intrigued. John took a deep breath. "I want to find out how our company really lives and works, not through reports and presentations, but through real experience. I want to pretend to be homeless and beg outside our office." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "What, John? Are you crazy? That's absurd." "Perhaps," John agreed, "but I feel I have to do it. I want to see how our employees treat those who are less fortunate than they are. I want to see if we're fostering the right corporate culture." Sarah shook her head. "John, that's risky. What if someone recognizes you? What if the press gets wind of it?" "That's why I need your help, Sarah." John leaned forward. "You're the only one I can trust with this information. I need you to have my back while I conduct this experiment." Sarah sighed. "John, I've worked with you long enough to know. When you're up to something, there's no stopping you. But let's at least work out the details." John smiled. "Thanks, Sarah. I knew I could count on you." They spent the next few hours discussing the details of the plan. John decided that he would work as a homeless man for a week, every day from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., normal business hours. Sarah was to provide his alibi by telling everyone that he was away for important negotiations abroad. "How are you going to change your appearance?" Sarah asked. "I've already thought of everything," John replied. "I'll grow a beard, use makeup to make me look older and more haggard. I'll wear old, worn clothes. No one will suspect that a successful CEO could be this tramp." Sarah still looked worried. "What if one of the employees does recognize you?" "Then we'll say it was a test of compassion and humanity," John shrugged. "After all, that's not far from the truth." The next morning, John woke up earlier than usual. He carefully applied makeup, making his face look more haggard and old. He put on old jeans, a worn jacket, and tattered boots. Looking at himself in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. "Well, John," he said to his reflection, "time to find out the truth." He left the house through the back door to avoid seeing his neighbors. When he reached his office building, he chose a spot near the entrance and sat down on the cardboard he had brought with him. The first few hours were the hardest. John wasn't used to sitting on the cold sidewalk, and his back began to ache after an hour. People passed by, barely noticing him. Some cast oblique glances, others pretended he didn't exist. Around noon, a young woman approached him. John recognized her as Emily Chen, one of the employees in the marketing department. "Hello," she said softly. "You must be hungry. Here, please take this." She held out a paper bag to him. John was touched. "Thank you, miss," he wheezed, trying to change his voice. "You're very kind." Emily smiled. "You're welcome. Anyone can find themselves in a difficult situation. What's your name?" "Jack," John replied, using a name he'd made up beforehand. "It's nice to meet you, Jack. I'm Emily. I work here." She nodded toward the building. "If you need anything, let me know, okay?" John nodded, feeling a lump come up to his throat. He hadn't expected such kindness. After Emily left, John opened the package. Inside was a sandwich, an apple, and a bottle of water. He gratefully began to eat, watching the people passing by. After a while, he noticed a group of men leaving the building. Among them was Michael Green, a middle manager known for his ambition. "Hey, you!" shouted Michael, spotting John. "Yeah, you tramp! Get out of here, you're ruining the look of our office." John was shocked at Michael's rudeness. He had never seen this side of his employee before. "I'm sorry, sir," John muttered. "I'm not bothering anyone." "I don't care," Michael barked. "If you're not out of here within the hour, I'm calling security." John felt anger boiling up inside him. He wanted to stand up and reveal his identity but held back. It was only the first day of the experiment. By the end of the day, John felt exhausted, both physically and emotionally. He gathered his things and slowly wandered away, reflecting on what he had seen and heard during the day. When he got home, he called Sarah. "How did it go?" she asked. "It was a revelation," John replied. "I saw sides of my employees I didn't even realize I had, both the good and the bad." "Are you sure you want to continue?" I could hear the concern in Sarah's voice. "More than sure," John said firmly. "This is just the beginning." The next morning, John took his seat again at the entrance to the office building. This time he felt more prepared, knowing what to expect. Around 9 a.m., he saw Frank Donovan, a security guard, approaching the building. Frank spotted John and frowned. "Hey, buddy," he said as he came closer. "You can't be in here. This is private property." John looked up, trying to look as pathetic as possible. "I'm sorry, sir. I'm just trying to earn my food." Frank sighed. "Look, I realize this is hard for you, but I have a job to do, and I have to do it. If you stay here, I'm in trouble." John nodded. "I understand. Maybe I can sit on the street corner. It's not private property there anymore, right?" Frank thought for a moment. "Yeah, I think it would be fine there. Just don't cause any trouble, okay?" "Thank you, sir," John said sincerely. "You're very kind." Frank smiled weakly. "You're welcome. Good luck to you." John moved to the street corner as Frank had suggested. From there, he could still watch the entrance to the building and his employees. Around noon, he saw Emily again. She spotted him and walked over. "Hi, Jack," she said with a smile. "I see you've moved on." John nodded. "Yes, the guard asked me to leave the private area. He was very polite." "That must have been Frank," Emily said. "He's a good man. Look, I brought you some more food. I was wondering if you need any help. Maybe I could help you find a job or a place to live." John was touched by Emily's concern. "Thank you, miss. You're very kind, but I have my own reasons for being here." Emily looked puzzled but didn't insist. "All right, Jack, but if you change your mind, let me know. I'll be happy to help." After Emily left, John noticed Michael Green leaving the building with a group of other managers. Michael noticed him and said something to his co-workers. They all laughed, throwing contemptuous glances at John. John felt anger overwhelm him. He never thought his co-workers could be so cruel. But he held back, mindful of the purpose of his experiment. An elderly man in an expensive suit stopped in front of John, scrutinizing him. "Good evening," he said in a soft voice. "This is the second day I've seen you here. You must be new to the neighborhood?" John nodded, trying not to give away his surprise. He recognized the man. It was Robert Fisher, one of his company's board members. "Yes, sir," John replied, trying to speak hoarsely. "I've recently found myself on the street and I'm trying to find my place." Robert nodded thoughtfully. "I understand. Life can be cruel. But I believe everyone has potential, even in the most dire circumstances." He pulled a business card out of his pocket and held it out to John. "Here, take it. It's the address of the shelter I support. There you can get a hot meal, a shower, and maybe even help finding a job. Just tell them Robert Fisher referred you." John was amazed. He'd never known this side of Robert. "Thank you, sir," he said sincerely. "You're very kind." Robert smiled. "You're welcome. I was once on the verge of bankruptcy myself. If it hadn't been for the help of one kind man, who knows where I'd be now. Now I try to repay that debt by helping others." After Robert left, John sat for a long time, pondering his words. He felt his view of the world and of his company changing with each day of this experiment. 11. On the third day, John decided to change his tactics a little. Instead of just sitting and observing, he started approaching people, asking for change or food. It wasn't easy. Years of being a successful CEO hadn't prepared him for the humiliation of begging. The first person he approached was a young man coming out of a coffee shop near the office building. John recognized him as Alex, a new employee in the IT department. "Excuse me, sir," John began in a shaky voice. "Would you mind sharing some change for food?" Alex stopped and looked at John. His face reflected a mixture of sympathy and awkwardness. Sorry, I don't have any cash," he said, averting his gaze. John noticed Alex's hand instinctively twitch to his pocket where his wallet probably lay. He realized the young man had lied. "I understand," John said. "Maybe you could buy me a sandwich at that coffee shop over there?" Alex hesitated. "Look, I'm late for work. Maybe some other time, okay?" With those words, he quickly walked away without looking back. John sighed. He couldn't blame Alex. How many times had he himself walked past homeless people, pretending not to notice them? The next person John approached was a middle-aged woman. He recognized her as Maria, the cleaning lady from the night shift. "Excuse me, ma'am," John addressed her. "Would you mind helping me out? I haven't eaten in 2 days." Maria stopped and looked at him. Her gaze was full of compassion. "Oh, you poor man," she said in a slight Spanish accent. "Wait a minute." She opened her bag and pulled out a foil-wrapped package from there. "Here, take this. It's my lunch, but I think you need it more." John was shocked. "But what about you?" Maria smiled. "Don't worry about me. I have a job and a roof over my head. I can buy myself more food, and it's harder for you right now." John felt a lump come up to his throat. "Thank you," he said hoarsely. "You have no idea how much this means to me." Maria patted him on the shoulder. "Hang in there, okay? Don't lose hope." After Maria left, John unwrapped the package. Inside was a homemade burrito, still warm. He began to eat, feeling tears come to his eyes. This simple meal, prepared with love and given with such compassion, seemed to taste better than any fine food he had ever tasted in expensive restaurants. Toward evening, John noticed a group of his top executives leaving the building. Among them were Michael Green and several other department heads. They were loudly discussing plans for the evening, talking about an expensive restaurant they were going to go to. John decided to approach them. "Excuse me, gentlemen," he began. "Would you mind helping a homeless man?" The group's reaction was immediate and shocking. Michael Green grimaced in disgust. "Back off, you tramp," he barked. "We don't give alms." The other manager, George Parker, laughed. "Hey, maybe we should hire him as a janitor. He looks desperate enough to work for a dime." The others laughed like it was the funniest joke they'd ever heard. John felt everything boiling up inside him with anger and frustration. These people whom he had personally hired and promoted, whom he trusted to run his company, were acting like heartless monsters. "You should be ashamed," he said quietly but firmly. "You have everything, and you can't find even a drop of compassion for those less fortunate." Michael Green seemed shocked that the homeless man dared to contradict him. "What did you say?" he growled, taking a step forward. At that moment, Frank, the security guard, intervened. Hey, let's have no trouble," he said, stepping between John and the group of managers. "Gentlemen, why don't you go about your business? And you, sir," he turned to John, "please don't make trouble. I don't want to call the police." The managers, casting contemptuous glances at John, withdrew. Frank sighed and shook his head. "Listen, buddy," he said quietly, "I realize this is hard for you, but don't get in trouble, okay? These guys can make your life even harder." John nodded, still trying to deal with his emotions. "Thanks for stepping in," he said. Frank shrugged. "You're welcome. You know, I can't give you money, it's against the rules, but here." He pulled an apple out of his pocket. "Take it. It's not much, but it's better than nothing." John gratefully accepted the apple. "Thank you, sir. You're a kind man." After Frank left, John sat for a long time, reflecting on the day's events. He felt his view of the world and of his company changing with every hour of this experiment. In the evening, after returning home, John called Sarah. "How was your day?" she asked with concern in her voice. John sighed. "It was a revelation. Sarah, I saw sides of our staff that I didn't even realize were there, both the good and the really, really bad." "What do you mean?" Sarah sounded alarmed. John told her about Maria's kindness, Robert Fisher's sympathy, and the shocking behavior of Michael Green and the other senior managers. "My goodness, John," Sarah said after a pause, "I can't believe Michael and the others behaved so horribly. What are you going to do?" John rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I'm not sure yet, but one thing I do know is that some serious changes are needed in our company. We've lost touch with reality, with the people we're supposed to serve." "Are you sure you want to continue this experiment?" Sarah asked. "Maybe you've learned enough already." "No," John said firmly. "I will continue. I feel like I haven't seen the full picture yet. I think this experience is changing me, Sarah. It's changing me for the better." The next morning, John took his seat on the street corner again. He felt tired. Nights on the hard floor of his safe house were not conducive to a good night's sleep. But at the same time, he felt strangely exhilarated. Each day of this experiment was revealing new truths about his company, his employees, and himself. Around 9 o'clock in the morning, he saw Emily approaching the building. She spotted him and approached. "Good morning, Jack," she said with a smile. "How are you today?" John tried to smile back, but it came with difficulty. "I've been better, Miss Emily, but I'll manage." Emily squatted down next to him. "Listen, Jack, I've been thinking about you a lot, and I want to help. I have a friend who works at a homeless outreach center. He could help you find temporary housing and maybe a job. What do you think?" John was touched by her concern. Part of him wanted to take the offer to see how the homeless outreach system worked, but another part realized that would be taking it too far. "Thank you, Miss Emily," he said softly. "You're very kind. But I have my own reasons for being here. I can't explain, but believe me, I appreciate your concern more than you can imagine." Emily looked puzzled and a little upset. "I don't understand, Jack, but I respect your decision. Just know that the offer still stands, okay?" After Emily left, John thought about how many people like her were in his company, genuinely caring about others, willing to help even a stranger, and how many like Michael Green are indifferent and cruel. Around noon, he noticed a group of employees going out for lunch. Among them was Alex, the young IT specialist he had met yesterday. John decided to approach the group. "Excuse me," John began as he approached the group of employees. "Could you please help a homeless man? I haven't eaten in 2 days." Alex, a young IT guy, recognized John and visibly tensed up. He quickly averted his gaze, but one of his co-workers, Rachel from HR, stopped. "Of course, sir," she said softly. "What do you need? Food or maybe some money?" John felt a lump come up to his throat. "Food would be most welcome, ma'am. Thank you." Rachel turned to her co-workers. "Guys, let's chip in and buy this man lunch. Who's with me?" Alex looked uncomfortable. I don't have any cash," he mumbled. Another employee, Mark from the finance department, snorted. "Why spend the money? He'll just drink it away. Come on, we're on our lunch break." Rachel threw Mark a judgmental look. "Mark, how can you be so heartless? The man is hungry." Mark shrugged. "Not my problem. Everyone is responsible for their own lives." John felt anger boiling up inside him. He wanted to yell at Mark that not everything in life is so simple, that sometimes people find themselves in difficult situations through no fault of their own. But he held back, mindful of his role. Rachel shook her head. "Okay, I'll buy him lunch myself. You go ahead, I'll catch up." As the others left, Rachel turned to John. "Forgive them, please. Not everyone realizes how easy it can be to get into a difficult situation." John nodded. "Thank you for your kindness, ma'am. You have no idea how much it means to me." Rachel smiled. "My name is Rachel. What's yours?" Jack, John replied, almost giving himself away. "It's nice to meet you, Jack. Let's go get you something to eat." They headed toward the nearest cafe. On the way, Rachel asked, "Jack, if it's no secret, how did you end up on the street?" John thought for a moment. He didn't want to lie, but he couldn't tell the truth either. "It's complicated story, Rachel. Let's just say I made some bad decisions, and at some point, everything just collapsed." Rachel nodded understandingly. "You know, Jack, I work in human resources, and I often see how easily people can lose everything. Sometimes all it takes is one wrong step, one mistake." They entered the cafe and Rachel ordered a sandwich, soup, and coffee for John. While they waited for their order, she continued, "Our company has a program to help employees who have fallen on hard times. But guess what? We haven't had a single person come to us in the last year, and I don't think it's because everyone's doing well." John frowned. "Why do you think that is?" Rachel sighed. "I think people are ashamed to admit they have a problem. They're afraid of being seen as weak or incompetent, especially in such a competitive environment like ours." John felt a prick of guilt. He had created this competitive environment. He had encouraged an aggressive approach to business without thinking about how it affected people. "It's sad," he said quietly. "People shouldn't be afraid to ask for help." Rachel nodded. "I agree. I tried to talk to management about it, but—" She hesitated. "I'm sorry. I'm not supposed to discuss such things." John pitched forward. "No, please continue. What did management say?" Rachel hesitated. "Well, they said that there's no room for weakness in business, that if people can't handle stress, they have no business being in our company." John felt his heart clench. Had he really created such a toxic culture in his company? At that moment, their order arrived. John gratefully accepted his food while Rachel continued to talk. "You know, Jack, I often think about how we treat each other, not just the homeless or the needy, but our co-workers, our friends, our family. We're so busy chasing success that we forget the most important thing, humanity." John nodded, feeling Rachel's every word resonate in his soul. "You are very wise, Rachel. The world would be a better place if more people thought like you." Rachel smiled. "Thank you, Jack. You know, this may sound strange, but I'm glad I met you today. You reminded me why I went into HR in the first place. I wanted to help people to make their lives better, and lately, I felt like I've been losing that purpose." John looked at her gratefully. "You have no idea how much you've done for me today, Rachel. And it's not just the food. You've reminded me that there are still good people in the world." As they left the cafe, Rachel held out a business card to John. "Here, take this. This is the address of a homeless outreach center. They can help you find temporary housing and a job. Here's my phone number. If you need to talk or need help, give me a call, okay?" John took the business card, feeling tears come to his eyes. "Thank you, Rachel. You have no idea how much this means to me." Rachel smiled. "Good luck to you, Jack. And remember, never give up hope." After Rachel left, John sat for a long time, reflecting on their conversation. He could feel the determination growing inside him. He realized that he had to change not only his company, but himself as well. In the evening, back at his safe house, John called Sarah. "Sarah," he said as soon as she answered, "I've made a decision. We have to completely overhaul our corporate culture." "What's wrong, John?" Sarah asked with concern in her voice. John told her about the conversation with Rachel, the reaction of the other employees, everything he had learned over the days. "Oh my God, John," Sarah said after a pause. "I had no idea it was this bad. What are you going to do?" John took a deep breath. "I'm not sure of all the details yet, but here's what I do know for sure. We have to create an environment where people aren't afraid to ask for help, where compassion and support are valued as highly as professionalism. We need to reward not only those who make more profit, but also those who show humanity." "That's a big change, John," Sarah remarked. "Are you sure the board of directors will support it?" "They'll have to," John said firmly, "because the alternative is a company that may be successful on paper but rotten on the inside, and I'm not going to let that happen." Sarah was quiet for a while. "I'm with you, John. What needs to be done?" John smiled, feeling a surge of energy. "First, I need to finish this experiment. I want to spend a couple more days as a homeless person, and then we're going to start changing the world, Sarah, starting with our company." "Good luck, John," Sarah said, "and be careful." Hanging up the phone, John walked over to the mirror. A haggard, unshaven man looked back at him from the reflection, but there was a fire of determination burning in that man's eyes. "You can do it, John," he said to his reflection. "You've got to make it, for the sake of all those people who deserve better." With these thoughts, he went to bed, preparing for a new day and new discoveries. The next morning, John awoke with the first rays of the sun. His body was aching from sleeping on the hard floor, but his spirit was determined. He knew that today would be a crucial day in his experiment. Stepping outside, John immediately noticed that the atmosphere around the office building had changed. People were whispering, casting leering glances at him. He realized that rumors of his run-in with the managers had spread. Around 9 o'clock in the morning, Frank, the security guard, approached him. "Morning, buddy," Frank said, looking around. "Listen, I need to talk to you." John tensed. "Is something wrong?" Frank sighed. "You see, Mr. Green came up to me last night. He ordered me to send you away. Said you were causing trouble and ruining the company's image." John felt anger boiling up inside him. "And what are you going to do?" Frank looked confused. "Look, I don't want to drive you away, but I have a family. I need this job. Maybe you could just move to another street, at least for a few days until things calm down." John thought for a moment. He understood Frank, but he also knew he couldn't just walk away. His experiment wasn't over yet. "Frank," he began slowly, "I understand your situation, but I can't just leave either. I have my reasons for being here." Frank frowned. What reason could a homeless man have to be sitting right here? John hesitated for a moment. Maybe it was time to reveal his identity? But no, it was too soon. "I can't explain it, Frank, but believe me, it's important. Not just for me, but for everyone who works in this building. Frank looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You know, I don't understand what's going on, but I sense that you're not just a simple drifter. There's something about you that's unusual. John smiled. Thank you for understanding, Frank. I promise I won't cause any trouble. Frank nodded. Okay. I'll tell Mr. Green that I talked to you and that you promised to be quiet. But be careful, okay? This guy's not the kind of guy you want to mess with. After Frank left, John wondered about Michael Green. He remembered hiring him a few years ago. Back then, Michael had seemed like an ambitious but honest young man. What had changed? Or maybe John was just overlooking his true nature. John's musings were interrupted by a familiar voice. Good morning, Jack. It was Emily, a young marketing employee. She was holding a paper bag and a cup of coffee. Good morning, Miss Emily, John replied, feeling his heart fill with warmth at her genuine concern. Emily took a seat next to him. I brought you breakfast, and, I've been thinking all night about our conversation last night. John tensed. About what exactly? About why you're here, Emily said, looking him straight in the eye. Jack, I don't want to pressure you, but I'm worried. You're clearly not your average homeless person. You're educated, you're polite, and there's a certain dignity. What happened to you? John felt his throat constrict. Emily was so sincere, so caring. He wanted to tell her the truth, but he knew he couldn't. Emily, he began slowly, you are very observant and very kind, but believe me, the less you know about me, the better for you. Emily frowned. Jack, are you in danger? Do you need help? John shook his head. No, it's nothing like that. Let's just say I'm here to understand something. About myself, about people, about the world. Emily looked at him thoughtfully. You know, Jack, you remind me of my grandfather. He was a philosophy professor, and he always said that true wisdom could only be found by stepping out of your comfort zone. John smiled. Your grandfather sounds like a wise man. He was, Emily nodded. And you know what? He would be proud of the way I act now. He always taught me to help others, even if I don't understand their motives. She stood up and shook off her skirt. I have to go to work, Jack, but I want you to know that whatever brought you here, I respect your choices, and I'm here if you need a friend. John felt a lump come up to his throat. Thank you, Emily. You have no idea how much this means to me. After Emily left, John sat for a long time thinking about her words. He thought about how easy it was to forget about simple human values while immersed in the world of big money and high technology. His musings were interrupted by a loud voice. Hey, hobo! I told you to get out of here! John looked up and saw Michael Green walking toward him with his face red with anger. He was followed by two other managers looking uncertain. Good morning, Mr. Green, John said calmly, standing up. Michael stopped, surprised that the homeless man knew his name. Where are you from? Never mind. I told you to get out. This is private property. John shook his head. Actually, it's a public sidewalk. I have a right to be here. Michael went even more purple. You smart ass. You think you know the law? I'll call the police. Michael, maybe you shouldn't, one of the managers said uncertainly. He's really not bothering anyone, is he? Shut up, Tom, Michael barked. You want our customers to see that ragamuffin in front of our office? It hurts the image of the company. John felt anger boiling up inside him, but he held back, mindful of his role. Mr. Green, he said calmly, have you ever considered what might happen to a person to put them on the streets? Are you sure that would never happen to you? Michael grinned. To me? I'm not some loser. I have a job, money, connections. I won't end up on the streets. John shook his head. You know, I used to think that too. I had a good job, a house, a family. And then life came as a surprise. Michael hesitated for a moment, but quickly pulled himself together. That's your problem. I'll give you 5 minutes to get out of here. Otherwise, I'm calling security and the police." With those words, he turned and walked toward the building, his co-workers following him, casting uncertain glances at John. John sighed. He realized the situation was heating up, but he couldn't just walk away. His experiment was not yet complete. At that moment, he noticed Rachel coming out of the building. She saw him and quickly approached. "Jack, what happened? I saw Michael talking to you. Did he threaten you?" John nodded. "He wants me to leave, says I'm ruining the company's image." Rachel shook her head. "That's a terrible thing to say. You know, I'm going to talk to HR about Michael's behavior. This isn't the first time he's been so aggressive." "Are you sure you want to do that?" John asked. "I don't want you to get in trouble because of me." Rachel smiled. "Don't worry about me, Jack. I know I'm doing the right thing. By the way, I talked to some friends at the Homeless Outreach Center. They're willing to help you if you decide to go to them." John felt his heart fill with warmth. "Thank you, Rachel. You are an amazing person." The day continued, and John watched the life of the office from his spot on the corner. He saw people rushing to work, going out to lunch, coming back from meetings. He noticed the little details, the way a young intern nervously adjusts his tie before an important meeting, the way a secretary surreptitiously wipes away tears after a phone call, the way a courier smiles at everyone he delivers mail to. Toward evening, an elderly woman approached him. John recognized her as Martha, a cleaning lady who had worked for the company for many years. "Hello, young man," she said, taking a seat next to him on the bench. "I've been watching you for a few days now. You don't look like the average homeless person." John smiled. "What makes you think that, ma'am?" Martha squinted slyly. "Oh, I have a keen eye. I see the way you observe people, like you're studying them. And you know what? I think you're doing something important." John was amazed at the insight of this simple woman. "You're very observant, ma'am." Martha nodded. "When you've been a janitor for so many years, you learn to notice things that others miss. You know, I've seen how this company has changed over the years. It used to be almost a family atmosphere. People cared about each other. And now it's all about money and careers." John felt a prick of guilt. He knew it was largely his fault. "Why do you think that happened?" he asked. Martha sighed. "You know, I think people just forget what's really important. They chase success, but they forget about humanity. But you know what? I believe things can still change. It just takes someone to remind people of what really matters." John felt his heart beat faster. "You're right, Martha. Absolutely right." After talking to Martha, John felt it was time to conclude his experiment. He had spent almost a week outdoors, and in that time he had seen and learned more than he had in his years in the office. The next morning he decided to reveal his identity. But before he did, he wanted to spend one more day as a homeless person to solidify his observations. The day began as usual. John took his seat on the street corner, watching the employees rushing to work. He spotted Emily, who, as usual, brought him coffee and a sandwich. "Good morning, Jack," she smiled. "How are you today?" John smiled back. "Better than yesterday, Miss Emily. Thank you for your concern." Emily took a seat next to him. "You know, Jack, I've been thinking a lot about our conversations, and I've decided that I want to make some changes in my life." "What do you mean?" John asked with interest. "I've applied to volunteer at a homeless outreach center," Emily said. "You've inspired me, Jack. I realized I can do more to help people." John felt a lump come up to his throat. "Emily, you're an amazing person. The world is a better place because of people like you." Emily smiled and stood up. "I have to go to work now. I'll see you later, Jack." After Emily left, John noticed a group of managers leaving the building. Among them was Michael Green. Upon seeing John, Michael frowned and headed towards him. "I told you to get out of here," he growled. "That's it. I've had enough. I'm calling the police." John stood up calmly. Mr. Green, before you do that, I think we need to talk. Michael grinned. What am I supposed to talk to a tramp about? About the future of this company, John said, straightening to his full height and wiping the makeup off his face. And about your place in it. Michael took a step back, his face pale. What? Mr. Harrison, but how? By this point, a small crowd of employees had gathered around them, including Rachel, Emily, and Frank. John looked around at those gathered. Yes, I'm John Harrison, CEO of this company. I've spent the last week pretending to be homeless to see how our company really works. There were surprised exclamations from the crowd. Emily covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with shock. I've seen a lot of things this week that have made me proud of our employees, John continued. But I've also seen things that have deeply disappointed me. He turned to Michael. Mr. Green, your behavior was unacceptable. You have shown cruelty and callousness not only to me, but to your co-workers as well. These are not the values we want to see in our company. Michael started to mutter something, but John stopped him with a gesture. From this point forward, a major change is beginning in our company, John announced. We will be creating a culture based on compassion, mutual aid, and respect for everyone, regardless of their situation. He turned to Rachel. Miss Thompson, I want you to lead the new Corporate Social Responsibility Department. Your compassion and desire to help others is exactly what our company needs. Rachel looked shocked. Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I'll do my best. John nodded and turned to Emily. Miss Chen, your kindness and sincerity have impressed me greatly. I want you to work with Rachel on new social initiatives. Emily blushed. I don't know what to say. Thank you for your confidence. Finally, John turned to Frank. Mr. Donovan, your honesty and humanity are an example to all of us. I want you to conduct ethics training for all employees, including upper management. Frank straightened and nodded. Yes, sir. I'll do my best. John looked around the gathering again. Starting today, we begin a new chapter in our company's history. Not only will we strive for financial success, but we will work to make the world a better place. It won't be easy, but I believe that together we can build a company that we will all be truly proud of. Cheers of approval could be heard in the crowd. People began to applaud, some even wept. John felt his heart fill with hope. He knew there was a lot of work ahead, but he was sure he had made the right decision. That evening, John sat in his office looking out at the city through the panoramic window. He thought about how much had changed during that week, not only in the company, but also in himself. There was a knock on the door. It was Sarah. How are you, John? She asked anxiously. John smiled. Better than I've ever been, Sarah. I thought this experiment would help me understand the company, but it actually helped me understand myself. Sarah nodded. And now what? Now, John said as he stood up, we start over. We're going to create a company that not only makes money, but makes the world a better place. A company where every employee feels valued and important. A company that remembers its social responsibility. Sarah smiled. That sounds like a big challenge. It is, John agreed. But you know what? I'm up for that challenge, and I know we have some great people to help us do it. He walked over to the window and looked out at the city spread out below. We can change the world, Sarah, step by step, day by day, and we're going to start right now. With those words, John turned to his computer, ready to start working on his company's new future. He knew the road would not be easy, but he was determined to do everything he could to make sure his experience was not wasted. After all, he now realized that true success is measured not only by money, but also by how we treat the people around us.